You think you know the moon, a quiet neighbor, a harmless light in the sky. But the moment humans try to live there, the truth hits like a shock. The moon is not gentle. It is a world that breaks metal, burns DNA, freezes machines, and exposes the limits of human survival, one element at a time. And that is exactly what this video is about. Today, you and I will walk through every hidden danger waiting for us on the lunar surface. From the razor-sharp dust that slices into lungs, to radiation storms that can end a life in hours, to a night so long and cold that entire habitats can die in the dark. If humanity can learn to survive on the moon, even just for a little while, we unlock the blueprint for living anywhere else in the universe. Every threat becomes a lesson. Every failure becomes a skill. And every challenge becomes preparation for the worlds waiting beyond the darkness. So here is the central question that shapes everything you are about to hear. If the moon is not meant for life, then why are we trying so hard to live there? And more importantly, what is the moon really trying to teach us? You set foot upon a world that is not Earth, yet you feel the echo of Earth's memory in every grain beneath your boots. On the surface of the moon you walk, and you realize that this grey expanse has been shaped by 4 billion years of cosmic violence. Meteorites, micrometeoroids crashing and pulverizing the crust, leaving behind a layer of dust so unlike anything you have ever known. There is no air here to comfort, no breeze to carry away the particles, no liquid water to soften the land. Instead, you find a regolith that is sharp, angular, and merciless. That dust is not the gentle sand of a beach. It does not roll softly between your toes. It cuts. It scratches. It clings. The particles are jagged, as if the moon's surface carried memories of every impact, every flash of heat, every burst of meteorite. They reach out and grab. They cling to boots, to gloves, to the fabric of your suit. They are static charged in the near-vacuum environment, eager to latch onto anything that crosses their path. You think of the dust as a silent adversary, because it is everywhere. It doesn't roar, it whispers, and in that whisper you feel the alien hostility of this place. Even the simplest movement becomes a confrontation. Every step kicks up a swirl of fine grey. The particles fill the airless space around your helmet. They adhere to visors and seals. And you know that dust that touches you from the outside is only the beginning, because the real terror is what happens when that dust crosses the boundary into your world, when it sneaks past your gloves, your suit, your helmet, and enters the human domain. Back on Earth, your lungs are used to gentle particles, to air that flushes and renews and carries moisture. Here, however, if even a few of those sharp lunar grains were to find their way inside, they would become unwanted guests. In a body that expects softness, these grains become abrasive. They irritate, they abrade, they trigger chemical reactions, provoke inflammation. Some research from the NASA-led studies warns that lunar dust may pose serious health risks to lungs and eyes. You lean against a landing module and notice how the machinery wears, the seals, the connectors, even the visors scratch under the dust's assault. It fits with what engineers found. That dust caused loss of traction, clogging of mechanisms, abrasion of surfaces, even infiltration into cabins, and you feel small. Because this dust is not just a nuisance. It is nature's reminder that you are a guest here, in a world that has no regard for your comfort. The moon's surface is indifferent. It carries no malice, but it does carry the weight of eons, of impact, of solar wind, of absence. This dust is sharp-edged, electrified, persistent. It attaches to you as though to anchor you here, to make you feel your fragility. Yet you also feel a strange admiration. This dust is a record of cosmic history. Each speck holds the memory of a meteor strike, of solar particles, of space weathering. The fact that it holds on, even in vacuum, even without wind, even without moisture, tells you something about endurance, about silence. You are surrounded by a world where erosion by wind or rain does not smooth things out. You are walking on a place that remembers impact after impact, unabated. In that moment you ask yourself, what does it mean to build, to inhabit, to explore a place like this? The dust is your adversary and your historian. It resists you. It preserves the moon's loneliness. It refuses to let you forget how alien this world is. And if you hope to stay, to remain for more than a short visit, you must learn to live with the dust, to protect yourself, to adapt, to respect the hazard. So you breathe slowly, you listen to the quiet, you let the weight of the grey landscape settle around you. You feel the dust settling on your boots, on your suit, creeping in the seams, reminding you that even in the vacuum of space, matter still matters. And you realize the journey into the moon's surface is not just a journey outward, it is a journey inward, into the fragility of being human, into what happens when you bring life into the place where nature intends no life. You glance at Earth, a distant blue marble, and you know that the dust here is proud of its eternal stillness, indifferent to your presence. And you understand, the moon does not welcome. It simply exists, and we are the ones who must adjust. You remember the dust, how it clung to your suit like a living thing, how it traced every crease of the fabric, how it refused to fall away, even when you brushed it off again and again. You remember the sharpness of it, the strange hostility in each tiny shard. It was as if the moon itself was telling you a quiet truth. You do not belong here, and that truth stays with you long after you step back inside the habitat. The airlock cycles. The pressure rises. Your breathing steadies, but a thought lingers, a thought that slips into your mind with the same persistence as those drifting grains at your boots. If the dust can cling to metal and fabric so fiercely, what happens if it finds its way somewhere far more fragile? Schmidt once said during a public discussion on lunar exploration, "Dust is the #1 concern in returning to the moon." And you understand that now, more deeply than ever, because the danger does not end at the surface. It follows you in, it settles around you, it waits for the smallest chance to cross into the human body. As you remove your helmet, you feel the faint dryness in the air, the sterile smell of machinery and recycled oxygen. You trust the filters, you trust the seals, but the moon has taught you something about trust. It is never absolute. No system is perfect, no barrier is unbreakable. You take a breath, and for a moment you imagine a particle no larger than a speck of smoke passing through a seam or riding on your glove, invisible and uninvited. If the first part of the story was about the dust that met your boots, the second part is about the dust that meets your lungs. Lunar dust is not like the dust you know on Earth. On Earth, wind and water soften sharp edges. Time makes grains rounder, more forgiving. On the moon, there is no wind and there is no rain. Nothing breaks the edges. Nothing wears down the glassy shards created by countless meteor impacts. When those microscopic fragments become airborne inside a habitat or cling to the suits that astronauts remove, they are not just a nuisance. They become a threat that feels unusually intimate. When a particle of lunar dust reaches the lung, it does not behave like pollen or soot. It behaves like a blade. It irritates the delicate lining of the respiratory system. It scratches and scrapes and unsettles. And the human body reacts in the only way it knows how. It sends fluid. It sends cells. It sends a cascade of chemical responses meant to defend and heal. But the material it faces is unlike anything the body evolved to handle. These sharp particles can trigger reactions that create oxidative stress, a kind of internal rusting that begins on a cellular level. They can ignite inflammation deep in the airways, inflammation that does not always subside quickly. The Apollo astronauts learned this the hard way. During those missions, several of them ended their shifts with burning throats, irritated eyes, dry coughing, and watery noses. They were on the moon for days, not months, not years. So you find yourself wondering what it would mean to stay, what the body would endure if it faced these particles again and again. If every day brought a new chance for dust to slip through an airlock or cling to a suit seam or float off a boot sole as someone stepped inside, scientists studying lung tissue in laboratories have found that lunar dust can produce forms of damage that heal poorly. In some cases, the tissue forms scars, In the worst models, the damage resembles a growing stiffness, a slow tightening of lung capacity, the way a shoreline tightens when it is dredged and exposed. This pattern of scarring has been compared to fibrotic conditions that exist on Earth, but with a character that feels foreign, almost unearthly in its cause, a kind of fibrosis that does not quite behave like anything shaped by Earth's environment. You picture that dust settling along the branches of the lung, the way snow settles quietly on pine needles. Except here, each flake is a shard, and each shard invites a reaction. The body tries to patch the wound. It lays down layers of tissue. Over time, these layers can stiffen, making each breath a little shallower, a little harder. The process might take months. It might take years, but the possibility is enough to make any long-term stay on the moon feel more uncertain. And beyond the physical harm, there is another kind of fear, one that grows quietly in the back of the mind. It is the fear that something so small, so easily overlooked, could become the greatest barrier to human survival on another world. Not a meteor strike, not a solar flare, not the vacuum of space, but dust. Ancient dust that has waited for billions of years, sharp as the memory of every impact that shaped it. You imagine the long days of a lunar mission, the routines that become second nature, the endless donning and doffing of suits, the inspection of seals, the cleaning of air filters, the careful brushing of equipment. And you imagine that one moment of distraction when someone forgets a corner, a fold, a latch. The thought reminds you that exploration is not only about bravery or ambition, it is also about discipline, about understanding the smallest parts of an environment and respecting them as much as the largest. The moon teaches humility in ways that Earth rarely does. On Earth, you are protected by layers of atmosphere, weather, biology, and time. On the moon, you are protected only by what you bring with you. A suit, a habitat, a filter, and even these are tested by something as simple as dust. As you breathe in the recycled air of the habitat, you feel the weight of that reality. You imagine the first settlements, the first research stations, the first long stays. You picture filters working tirelessly, crews moving carefully, engineers designing systems that must never fail. Because failure does not come as a dramatic explosion or a sudden catastrophe. It comes as a grain that slips through darkness and rests where life is most vulnerable. Outside the port window, the landscape is still. The grey plains stretch toward the horizon in a silence that feels both beautiful and indifferent. In that silence, you sense the lesson beneath the danger. Survival here is not about conquering. It is about listening. It is about noticing what the moon has been for billions of years and adapting yourself to its nature. You take another breath, slow, intentional, and somewhere deep inside you recognize that the story of lunar dust entering the lungs is not only a tale of danger, it is a reminder of what it means to carry human fragility into a place that has never known life. It is a reminder that the body is both resilient and delicate, both determined and easily harmed, and in that contrast, there is something profoundly human. You let that awareness settle, the way dust settles onto untouched ground, gently, quietly, completely. And then, just as you begin to feel stable again, another thought rises. Because the force that threatens you from the ground is not the only one out there. Above you, beyond the thin protection of your shelter, something else is falling toward the surface every moment. Something invisible, something relentless, something born in the heart of stars. And you realize the next danger does not rise from the ground, it falls from the sky. You sit in the quiet after the coughing fades. The dust has settled for now, though you know it never truly settles on the moon. It drifts in the corners of your mind as much as it drifts across the floor. You think about the way those tiny shards could carve themselves into the most delicate parts of the human body. You think about fragility, about breath, about the thin membrane that keeps you alive inside an alien world. Yet even as these thoughts linger, you sense that the moon has something else to teach you. The danger that creeps into your lungs is only one kind of threat. There is another, one that does not cling to boots or ride on gloves, one you cannot see or hear or touch. You do not inhale it, it simply passes through you. And as you turn your gaze upward, beyond the walls of the habitat, beyond the thin curve of the skyless horizon, you understand that the next danger does not need to sneak inside. It comes straight through the air, straight through the suit, straight through the body. It comes from the sun, from the galaxy, from the universe itself. The vacuum outside is not empty. It is alive with particles moving at speeds that defy intuition. Particles born in the hearts of exploding stars and hurled across the cosmos. There is no magnetic field here to bend their paths away from you, no atmosphere to absorb their fury. On Earth, layers of protection do the work silently, day after day. But here, none of that exists. You stand on a world that offers no barrier, no shield, no mercy. Solar physicist Eugene Parker once said, "Space is not a friendly place." And you feel the truth of that settle into you, as if the words themselves were a warning delivered across decades. Cosmic rays arrive without pause. They are high-energy visitors from regions of the galaxy that humans have barely begun to imagine. They do not drift, they strike. A single particle can pass through the human body like a ghost with momentum, slicing through molecules, breaking chemical bonds that keep cells alive and orderly. Most of the time, the damage is minor, something the body knows how to repair. But the bombardment here is constant, relentless, unfiltered. Then there are solar storms. They do not give warning. The sun erupts in a flash of light and particles, a wave of radiation that can cross the distance to the moon in minutes. On Earth, this energy is softened by magnetic fields that wrap the planet like a protective cloak. On the moon, it arrives raw and unmoderated. A storm like the one recorded in 1972 would have been lethal to an astronaut standing on the lunar surface. Hours, maybe less. That is all it would take. You imagine stepping outside during such a storm. There would be no sound, no flash visible to the eye at first, just an invisible tide sweeping across the plains. It is strange how quiet danger can be in space, the kind that kills without touch, without force, without drama. Radiation is a silent sculptor, shaping the future of cells in ways that may not become visible for years. Even the steady background levels are far above what humans experience on Earth. Researchers have measured radiation on the moon many times higher than the doses astronauts receive aboard the International Space Station. Compared to Earth, it is not a gentle increase. It is a leap. A world where exposure is amplified by a factor of hundreds. A world where DNA cannot keep up with the injuries, cannot repair itself before the next blow arrives. The body knows how to heal, but it has limits. When the damage comes faster than the repair, the code that builds you begins to lose clarity. Mutations accumulate. Cells misbehave. Tissues shift into patterns that do not belong. Radiation reshapes life not by destroying it instantly, but by rewriting it slowly. It plants seeds of change that may take months or years to grow roots. You think back to the Apollo astronauts who returned home after days on the surface. Their risks were real, but their exposure was brief. Now imagine living there, weeks turning into months, months turning into years. Every sunrise brings a new wave of cosmic particles. Every sunset brings the knowledge that the night will not save you, because the night brings its own kind of cold danger. Being on the moon is like walking through a storm with no raindrops, only the force of the wind embedded in everything around you. The radiation is everywhere at once. You cannot taste it, you cannot smell it, and yet it is writing messages into your cells, messages you would rather not read. Scientists use careful language when describing these risks. They talk about dose rates and effective exposures, about shielding and tissue sensitivity, about limits and tolerances. They say these things with precision because precision is what science requires. But behind those measured words is an undeniable truth. If humans wish to live on the moon, they must learn how to stand in the path of a universe that does not care about the vulnerability of flesh. You picture the solutions being designed. Layers of regolith piled over habitats, water tanks arranged to form protective walls, magnetic shields that imitate Earth's field in miniature. But you also know that radiation has a way of finding the small openings, the weak spots, the seams. It is patient, it waits, it comes from every direction. In the stillness of the habitat, you feel the enormity of it. The moon strips away the illusion of safety that Earth gives so easily. On Earth, you walk under a blue sky, unaware that the planet is constantly absorbing and transforming radiation on your behalf. On the moon, you walk under a black sky filled with stars that shine not just with light, but with energy that never stops moving toward you. You think of future explorers, children perhaps, born on Earth but raised in a place where the very airless horizon carries a warning. You think of doctors developing treatments for radiation exposure, engineers worrying over shielding models, mission planners studying solar cycles as if lives depended on them. And they do. The danger from dust was intimate. The danger from radiation is immense. One lives inside the breath, the other lives inside the sky. And both must be understood if humanity hopes to stay. You walk to the small window of the habitat and watch the sunlight stretch across the ground in harsh, unfiltered brightness. You know that this light is not the gentle warmth of Earth. It is sharper, more direct, a beam that carries with it not only brightness, but energy capable of reshaping the molecules of your skin. And as the sun begins to dip toward the horizon, you feel a different kind of tension rise. Because here, on the moon, danger does not end when the light fades. The setting sun is not a signal of rest. It is a signal of another threat emerging, one that grows not from energy, but from absence, a threat that even metal fears. Night is coming, and the cold that follows is a force of its own. The sun slips beneath the horizon, and you feel the habitat grow a little quieter, as if it knows that another kind of danger is beginning to gather. Radiation has its own rhythm, its own silent urgency. But as the last rays of light fade across the dust, you sense a shift in the very character of the moon. The threat from above eases for a moment, but only to make room for something else, something colder, something older. You remember what the engineers told you before you came here. Survivability on the lunar surface is a negotiation with extremes, and while radiation is invisible and relentless, temperature is blunt and absolute. It does not hide its intentions. It swings with a certainty that borders on cruelty. Gene Cernan once said in a post-mission reflection, "The moon is a very, very hot and very, very cold place." You heard that sentence years ago, long before you ever imagined setting foot here. But only now, standing on this silent world, do you understand what he meant. It was not exaggeration, it was testimony. A lunar day lasts nearly 30 Earth days. Half of that time the sun blazes with direct, unfiltered intensity, 45 degrees of sunlight, striking the surface without atmosphere to soften it, driving temperatures to levels that can challenge metal itself. For 2 weeks, the heat builds and builds. The ground warms until it seems to vibrate. At its peak, the temperature can approach 300 degrees Celsius, hot enough to warp certain alloys, hot enough to test the limits of every material designed to withstand alien worlds. Inside the suit, cooling systems hum constantly. Without them, your body would overheat in minutes. Machines work harder than lungs here. They circulate fluid, dissipate heat, compensate for a star that shows no mercy. When you touch the surface with your glove, the regolith feels strangely deceptive. It is not warm like sand. It is dry and dead. Yet the heat contained within it radiates upward with a quiet ferocity. As the hours pass, you become aware of something subtle, yet unsettling. Every bolt, every hinge, every seal in your suit and equipment experiences the same heat you do. Everything expands. Materials stretch to their limits. A joint that flexed perfectly in the morning now feels a little tighter. A panel that sealed effortlessly now requires force. Heat does not destroy immediately. It erodes certainty. It gently widens the cracks that stress will widen later. But the true test comes when the light leaves. The moment the sun slips below the horizon, the temperature plummets. On Earth, the fading of sunlight is softened by air and weather. Here, There is nothing to slow the fall. In mere hours, the lunar surface plunges into a deep freeze, colder than anything naturally found on Earth. The heat you felt earlier becomes a memory. Now every joint, every wire, every circuit faces the opposite extreme. As the temperature drops, metals contract. The expansion of the day reverses quickly, too quickly for many components to adapt. A seal that handled heat with grace might stiffen and crack in the cold. The lubricants inside joints can seize. The smallest misalignment becomes a lock. Electronics respond poorly. Batteries lose efficiency. Some devices simply surrender. The cold does not simply slow things down. It reaches into the structure of matter itself. Materials that were flexible under a warm sun become brittle. Plastics harden. Glass becomes more fragile. The habitat walls groan as they adjust to the shifting pressure between interior warmth and exterior darkness. Every sound becomes more pronounced in the silence. A creak is no longer just a creak. It is information. It is the moon speaking through the metal that stands between you and the void. And this cycle does not stop. It repeats without hesitation, without compassion, without deviation. Heat stretching, cold compressing. 2 weeks of expansion followed by 2 weeks of contraction. Over and over for as long as humans dare to stay. You imagine living here for months at a time. Each dawn brings a wave of heat. Each dusk brings a wave of cold. The materials you depend on are caught in a cycle of stress they were never meant to endure on Earth. Engineers can compensate. They can design alloys, seals, joints, and thermal controls. But no design remains perfect under unending strain. Fatigue accumulates. Weak points develop. The moon finds every flaw. The temperature swings shape behavior as much as they shape landscape. Work schedules shift with the Sunday activity slows during peak heat to preserve machinery. During the night, operations depend heavily on energy reserves. Solar panels sleep, and the stored power must be rationed with precision. Mistakes are not tolerated well in darkness. The cold will turn a minor oversight into a major failure before you even realize something has gone wrong. And as you stand there, imagining the long arc of the lunar day, you recognize that temperature here is not just an environmental condition. It is a force with personality. It is patient and predictable, yet ruthless. It creates its own rhythm, a rhythm alien to human biology and human engineering. You must follow it, because you cannot change it. The moon does not care that humans prefer consistency. It does not care that machines prefer stability. It cycles between extremes because that is what a world without air must do. When sunlight hits, it bakes. When sunlight leaves, it freezes. Boundaries do not exist here. Gradients do not exist here, only opposites. Inside the habitat, the warmth feels temporary, borrowed from a power system that must fight continuously to keep it that way. You remind yourself that you are living between opposites, that this shelter, this thin layer of technology, is the only reason your body does not follow the temperature outside. You wrap your hands around a cup of warm fluid and imagine what the next lunar morning will bring. Heat that stretches you, cold that contracts you, repetition without end, and then comes the memory of something the instructors said during training. The worst problems on the moon are not made by sudden events. They are made by cycles. Cycles break things. Cycles reveal what pressure never could. That truth rests with you now as the window outside darkens completely. Because in a few more moments, the long lunar night will begin. A night not measured in hours, but in weeks. A night deeper than anything you have ever experienced. A night that reaches into metal, into machinery, into bone. And as the cold begins to swallow the surface, you feel the edge of a new realization. When the sun sets on the moon, it does not simply become dark. It becomes a darkness 40 times longer than an earthly night. A darkness that swallows everything. The cold of lunar night does not strike all at once. It arrives the way a deep truth does, slowly at first, then suddenly overwhelming. After long hours spent watching the temperature fall, After the last glow of sunlight slips behind the mountains and the surface stops shimmering, you feel the world outside the habitat cross a threshold. It is no longer cooling. It is surrendering to the dark. You still remember the heat of the day, the way the regolith almost seemed to pulse beneath your boots, the way metals stretched and machinery groaned. But now, the heat feels like a distant memory, something you dreamed rather than lived. The moon swings like a pendulum between extremes, and as you feel the cold tightening around the structure, you understand that this place is governed not by weather, but by contrast. The engineers warned you, the scientists warned you. Durability here is defined not by strength, but by endurance across cycles that never end. And now, as the last traces of light disappear completely, you realize that temperature is not the only thing that changes with breathtaking speed. Light itself vanishes. There is no twilight on the moon, no soft gradient, no lingering haze of blue. The moment the sun dips below the horizon, the world is plunged into a darkness as absolute as the vacuum it floats in. It is a darkness that feels older than time, a kind of cosmic silence given shape. Paul Spudis once explained it with a clarity only a lunar scientist could possess. There is no air on the moon to scatter sunlight, so when the sun sets, it sets for real. You remember that line because it seemed almost poetic when you first heard it. Now, standing in the faint glow of the habitat's interior lamps, you understand that it was not poetry. It was geology speaking through a scientist's voice. The night here lasts for 14 days. Not the 14 hours you know on Earth. Not the passing of an evening into morning. This is a night that stretches across half a month, unbroken, unsoftened, unrelenting. With the darkness comes a swift collapse of the environment's energy balance. Solar power, the lifeline of so many systems, becomes instantly useless. Panels that gleamed under the sun only hours ago now face an emptiness that gives them nothing. Batteries must shoulder the burden, but batteries do not thrive in cold. Chemistry slows, charges fade, capacity shrinks. Every system inside the habitat begins to behave differently as the temperature plummets outside. Machines are like living things in their need for consistency, and the cold denies them that comfort. Some modules risk freezing, coolant lines stiffen, thermal regulators strain. Even with insulation and active heating, every hour of the night is a negotiation. Every minute is a reminder that this world was not designed for us. You wrap your hands around a cup of warm water and look toward the small circular window. From inside it appears as a hole cut straight into infinity. You see no blue, no red, no trace of day, only a stark contrast between the faint, distant glow of stars and the ink-black horizon that feels almost like the edge of existence itself. It is at this moment you realize something that Earth never taught you. Darkness is not the absence of light. Darkness is a presence all its own. It changes your thoughts, your physiology, your understanding of time. Minutes feel slower, breathing feels louder. The idea of a sunrise becomes less a certainty and more a hope. Engineers back home often talk about designing systems that can hibernate during the lunar night. Machines that can pause themselves, sleep for 2 weeks, wake without damage. It sounds elegant when spoken aloud, but you know the truth now. No system likes to sleep in deep cold. Metals become brittle, plastics shrink, lubricants stiffen, electronics behave unpredictably. Nothing built by human hands enjoys being forgotten in the dark. You think about the Apollo era, about how those missions ended before the lunar night took hold. They left just in time, escaping a challenge they did not yet have the tools to face. But now, if humans seek to stay, the night cannot be avoided. It must be endured. It must be studied. It must be survived. Outside, the surface temperature falls nearer to its lowest limits. The regolith freezes into a hard, unyielding crust. Any rover left unheated would stiffen until its wheels could not turn. Any unprotected cable would contract until it snapped. The moon does not freeze gently, it freezes completely. And yet, the darkness carries something more than physical challenge. As the hours pass, as the long lunar night truly begins, you feel a shift inside yourself. You are cut off from the sun, the ultimate symbol of time and orientation. Without it, the mind wanders differently. Days blend, moments stretch. A strange quiet spreads through your thoughts. This is the part no briefing can prepare you for. On Earth, even the darkest places have echoes of life. Cities cast their glow, clouds reflect distant light, horizons hold shape. Here, nothing holds shape. The dark does not just surround you, it becomes a dimension of its own. You sense the isolation deepening. Communication works, systems work. You are not in danger. Yet a feeling settles in, subtle but undeniable. You are far, not just in distance, but in experience. No human anywhere on Earth is living what you are living. No one shares this night with you. It is a night humanity has never truly known. The stars, so sharp and brilliant, offer no warmth, no comfort. They feel further away than they did before sunset, as if the night itself stretches the universe. You look at them and think of something a veteran astronaut once said: "In space, you are not looking at the night sky, you are looking at forever." Forever is a difficult companion. The habitat hums softly, and that hum becomes your anchor. You listen to it the way sailors listen to the creak of wooden planks, measuring the health of the vessel by the way it breathes. You check panels that do not need checking. You glance at systems whose numbers have not changed. It is not fear, exactly. It is awareness sharpened by solitude. And then, as you let your eyes adjust once more to the darkness outside, you feel a quiet realization spreading through you. This night carries something deeper than cold, something heavier than silence, something more ancient than the moon itself. Because here, across this vast and airless desert, the darkness does not merely steal the light, it steals the sense of belonging. And in that deep and absolute isolation, you begin to understand that the next challenge is not physical at all. It is the loneliness of a world where even Earth can feel impossibly far away. The lunar night deepens until it becomes something beyond darkness. It feels less like an absence of light and more like a vast ocean you are floating within. A place where your thoughts echo farther than sound ever could. And as the hours stretch into days, and the days stretch toward a second week without sunrise, you begin to sense something shifting in your perception of the world around you. For a while, you could still picture Earth in your mind, glowing blue and familiar. During the day, when the sun burned high and sharp, you knew it was there behind you, even if you could not see it. During the early night, when the stars first emerged with impossible clarity, you could close your eyes and imagine that bright marble hanging gently above the horizon. But as the lunar night sinks deeper and deeper into its long silence, a different feeling grows, the sense that something important is missing, something you did not realize your mind depended on, even when your body did not. You look out the small window again, expecting some faint reminder of home. You find none. This is when the true meaning of isolation begins to reveal itself. Not the isolation of distance, which you expected, not the isolation of darkness, which you prepared for. This is something else, a deeper isolation that comes from standing on a world where Earth does not rise. A world where home is not above you, not beside you, not anywhere within sight. You feel the weight of that even before you step outside again. The moon is tidally locked to Earth. One hemisphere forever faces us. One hemisphere forever turns away. On the near side, astronauts can look up and see home. They can watch the blue glow of oceans, the swirling white of clouds, the steady comfort of continents they once lived on. But on the far side, the hidden half, none of that exists. The sky is a universe without an anchor. The horizon holds only stars. Bill Anders once spoke about the shock of seeing the Earth from the moon, saying, "We came all this way to explore the moon, and the most important thing is that we discovered the Earth." You think about that line now, you think about the awe behind it, the raw beauty he described, and then you realize that on the far side of the moon, you would not see that discovery at all. You would see only absence. When you walk onto the far side, the first thing you notice is how quiet your mind becomes. There is no bright sphere to orient you, no shining planet to remind you why you came. What remains are stars that feel colder, more distant, sharper than they did on the near side. Without Earth in the sky, the universe feels larger, and you feel smaller. You understand now why some scientists call the lunar far side the loneliest place a human can stand. There is no blue light to soften the shadows, no familiar shape to give your eyes something to rest upon. The horizon curves like a question with no answer. You breathe, and the sound inside your helmet feels louder than it should. Each step lands softly in the regolith, but the silence that follows is absolute. The Earth is not there to comfort you, and without that comfort, the mind must build its own. Communication becomes an entirely different challenge on the far side. There is no direct line to Earth. Signals cannot travel through the solid body of the moon. Every transmission must bounce from one satellite to another, relayed through networks carefully positioned to see both you and Earth at the same time. It works most of the time, but never instantly, never perfectly. A delay of just a few seconds does not sound like much when spoken aloud in a conference room. But out here, where decisions can shape survival, those seconds matter. They stretch, they complicate, they make remote operation of machines far more difficult. A robot arm moves a moment after you tell it to. A rover wheel responds just slightly too late. The rhythm between human and machine becomes uneven. You begin to understand why engineers insist that everything on the far side must become more autonomous, more independent. Robots must make their own choices. Systems must diagnose their own faults. Tools must anticipate failure before you even know something is wrong. Because if they depend entirely on you, and you depend on help from Earth, the lag becomes a weakness. And weakness is something the moon never forgives. As you move among the rocks and shadows, you feel the isolation tightening its grip in ways you did not expect. You are not only far from home, you are cut off from the sight of it. That sight, which once felt like a simple comfort, now feels like something sacred, something you did not appreciate until it vanished. In the habitat on the far side, the absence follows you. During rest cycles, you catch yourself glancing toward the window, expecting a small blue glow that will never appear. You check the communications panel more often than necessary. You listen for static that might mean the relay satellites are drifting out of alignment. You watch the clock, marking the moments when Earth's delay becomes longer or shorter, depending on orbital geometry. Even the crew begins to speak differently, their voices quieter, as if each of them feels the same subtle pressure in the air. This is isolation of a kind humanity has never truly faced. On Earth, even in the most remote places, you can look up and know your world is around you. On Mars, someday, astronauts will look up and see their planet as a bright star. But here, on the far side of the moon, there is no visual reminder of origin. You stand on a world that does not show you where you came from, and in that absence, something changes. You sense that the moon is teaching a different kind of lesson now. Not about dust or radiation or temperature, not about machinery or geology. This is a lesson about the mind, about the delicate thread between identity and environment, about what happens when the sky no longer carries your history. The isolation becomes a landscape of its own. You imagine future missions, future bases, future explorers walking this same ground. You wonder how they will adapt, how long it will take before the far side becomes normal rather than unsettling, whether humans will design new rituals, new psychological anchors, new ways of grounding themselves when the planet that shaped them is hidden behind stone and shadow. Outside, the darkness feels deeper here than anywhere else on the moon. It is not simply the loss of light, it is the loss of direction. And as you stand on this ancient, silent world with no Earth in the sky, you realize that this chapter of the journey is not just about survival, it is about self. Because when the machines around you begin to struggle, when the delays grow longer and the systems hesitate, it becomes clear that eventually something will have to take over. And when the robots are not fast enough, not aware enough, not alive enough to handle what the far side demands, there is only one thing left to rely on: you. The far side teaches you that isolation is not only a feeling, it is an environment. It shapes the way machines behave, how decisions are made, how the mind interprets risk. You learn quickly that life out here is a chain held together by thousands of small links, each one depending on the others. And standing beneath a sky where Earth does not rise, you begin to feel the weight of those interlocking systems more clearly. When you return to the habitat and cycle through the airlock, you notice something subtle. It is the idea that survival out here is never a single task. It is not dust alone, not heat alone, not darkness or radiation or isolation alone. It is the way these dangers weave together, tightening around every solution you try to create. On Earth, problems often feel separate. On the Moon, they merge, they react, they escalate. And, as you sit at the small metal table, listening to the soft hum of the air recyclers, you begin to understand the next chapter of this story. The Moon has been showing you the surface dangers. Now it reveals a more complicated truth. Solutions here do not simply solve problems. They often create new ones. The engineers back home work tirelessly, imagining ways to outsmart this world. You admire their brilliance, their optimism, their belief that every challenge can be met with a better design. But as the days pass, you begin to see how delicate each system truly is, how every fix leans on another fix, how every improvement depends on another vulnerable thread. Dust shields, for example. They sound elegant when described in clean diagrams and confident technical briefings. Electrified panels that repel particles, vibrational surfaces that shake contaminants loose. But all of them require power. Power requires solar panels. Solar panels require sunlight. And sunlight cannot reach them if dust settles thick across their surfaces. A circle forms, a loop, a problem feeding the solution that feeds the problem again. Dust attacks the panels. Panels lose power. Power loss weakens the dust shields. Weaker shields allow more dust to accumulate, and the loop tightens like a slow turning gear. You think of something Richard Feynman once said, "For a successful technology, reality must take precedence over public relations, for nature cannot be fooled." That truth feels sharper out here, where the absence of Earth's comforts exposes the difference between theory and practice. Nature on the Moon is not aggressive. It is indifferent, and indifference is often harder to overcome than hostility. Other ideas look promising in controlled environments. Magnetic filters, for instance. They can attract particles that contain iron. But lunar dust is not generous in its composition. Much of it carries no magnetic response at all. The filter catches what it can, and the rest passes through untouched. It is like trying to remove thorns from a field by only picking up those made of metal. Then there are protective coatings. Thin layers applied to surfaces to prevent dust from sticking. They work beautifully at first. Smooth, clean, repellent. But the Moon is a world that sands everything with patience. Micrometeorites pepper the surface constantly, breaking apart particles that are already sharp. Over time, even the strongest coatings wear away, grain by grain, until the surface beneath is exposed again. What was once a shield becomes simply another surface waiting to be scratched. So engineers propose another idea. Bury the habitats beneath regolith. Use the Moon itself as insulation and shielding. It sounds brilliant. In many ways, it is. The surface becomes a shell, protecting you from radiation, from temperature swings, from micrometeorite strikes. But to bury a habitat, you need machines. Machines that dig, machines that haul, machines that assemble, and machines do not fare well in lunar conditions. Dust infiltrates joints, heat expands metal beyond tolerance, cold fractures seals, batteries collapse in the long nights, servos seize, wheels grind, cameras haze over. Even the most advanced autonomous systems suffer under the stress. What should have been a protective solution becomes a labor that demands other technologies. And those technologies are themselves fragile. You realize that the more you try to build, The more you rely on machines that are not yet ready, the more you improve the habitat, the more you depend on systems that break down. Each advancement links you more tightly to a chain that might fail at any point. It becomes clear that survival on the moon is not simply a matter of designing better machines, it is a matter of designing fewer points of failure. But humans are not good at simplicity when exploring the unknown. The instinct is always to add, to enhance, to reinforce. Each addition seems logical in isolation, but out here, nothing lives in isolation. You see how one solution leans on another and another, until the entire structure feels like a tower built on shifting dust. You think of future missions, the enormous planning behind them, the optimism that drives them, the belief that every new technology will behave exactly as expected. And then you look out at the far side landscape, cold and unmoved, and you understand something deeper. The moon does not care how many solutions you design, it only responds to the ones that respect its nature. Earth is a forgiving world. It softens our mistakes with air, with water, with weather, with time. The moon forgives nothing. A small oversight becomes a major failure. A minor dependency becomes a critical flaw. Every design must be honest, because the environment exposes dishonesty quickly. The more you study the systems around you, the more you sense a strange theme emerging. You are not fighting the moon. The moon is not fighting you. The real struggle is with your own assumptions, your own tendency to solve problems by adding complexity rather than subtracting it. As you walk past the equipment bay, you notice how each device sits like a quiet confession. The rover that needs more maintenance than expected. The dust shield that only works under ideal conditions. The battery pack that loses efficiency night after night. The air filters that require constant scrutiny. You begin to ask yourself a question that humanity will have to face eventually. Are we creating solutions that work with the moon, or solutions that work only against it? Because the more you try to control the environment, the more it reveals the flaws in your approach. The more you depend on layers of technology, the more you expose yourself to the chain reaction of failure. Every point of dependency is a point of weakness. Every added system is another opportunity for the moon to remind you that your presence here is temporary. The answers do not come easily. They should not. This world asks difficult questions, and in the quiet hours, when the hum of machinery becomes the only sound you hear, you realize that the challenges you face are not simply mechanical or environmental. They are philosophical. You take a slow breath as the machines around you pulse with artificial life. You think about dust, about heat, about darkness, about isolation. You think about every solution that has stumbled, every system that has cracked, every plan that has worn thin. And then the truth arrives with a clarity you did not expect. These failures are not random. They are pointing towards something deeper, something that lies beneath the surface of every broken system and every clever idea that slowly collapses under lunar reality. And as the silence settles again, you ask yourself the question that will define the next chapter of this journey. What is the real reason so many solutions fail on the moon? The more time you spend on the moon, the more clearly you see the pattern behind every failure, the dust that clings to everything, the temperature that splits metal down invisible seams, the radiation that writes its signature inside living cells, the darkness that stretches farther than memory, the isolation that presses inward until even your own thoughts feel distant, and finally the solutions, built with brilliance and optimism, that buckle beneath the very environment they are meant to tame. As you sit alone at the monitoring console, watching sensors breathe in their slow, silent rhythm, the truth rises through you, like something long understood but never fully named. All these problems are not separate, they are symptoms of a deeper reality. The moon was never meant to support life. Not life as you know it. Not life shaped by oceans, forests, pressure, and air. You breathe out softly, and the sound echoes faintly in your helmet as if the moon itself is listening. The failures do not stem from poor engineering. They are not the result of inattention or ignorance. They come from the simple fact that you are trying to build a small version of Earth in a place that has none of Earth's qualities. Every system you have brought with you is a translation, a compromise, a fragile imitation of the world your body understands. The moon is not wrong, it is simply itself. When you step outside again, the landscape greets you with the same blank expression it has worn for billions of years. The dust shifts quietly under your boots. The horizon lies flat, untouched, indifferent. You sense no hostility, no welcome, only presence. And this presence, unshaped by life, untouched by weather, unsoftened by atmosphere, reminds you what you are, a visitor. Stephen Hawking once said, "We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star." And standing here on a world that has no air, no color, no wind, you feel the truth of that line, with a clarity that humbles you. You are clever, you are determined, but you are also out of place. The dust does not intend harm, the radiation does not aim at you, the cold is not a punishment, the darkness is not a warning. They simply exist the way elemental forces exist, without purpose or malice. Each one is a reminder that life everywhere else is shaped by conditions that the moon does not share. You kneel and let the regolith slip between your gloved fingers. It falls silently. No breeze carries it. No moisture binds it. The grains move only because you touch them. As soon as you pull your hand away, the landscape returns to stillness, unchanged, unaffected, unconcerned. For a moment, you picture Earth, not as a planet, as a cradle, a place where every living thing, every sensation, every biological rhythm finds a home. You were built for a world that supports you automatically, a world that works with you, not against you. Here, everything resists you simply by being different. The more you observe, the more the pattern reveals itself. You design machines to survive the dust, and the dust erodes them anyway. You build shields against radiation, and the universe sends more than you anticipated. You create insulation against the cold, and the cold penetrates every corner you overlooked. You develop systems to preserve power during the long night, and the night stretches beyond what chemistry prefers. No part of the moon has ever conspired against you, but no part of it bends in your favor either. This is what the others meant when they spoke of its indifference. Indifference is not cruelty. Cruelty requires intent. Indifference is stronger. It does not acknowledge you. It does not adjust for you. It does not change because you suffer or squirm. It simply continues as it always has, from the moment it formed from a young Earth's shattered crust to the moment your boots first pressed into its soil. You realize that the struggle is not between you and the moon. The struggle is between you and your expectation that the universe should resemble home. You brought Earth's rules with you, hoping they would apply here, but they do not. They cannot. Humans are used to shaping their surroundings, cutting mountains into roads, claiming oceans with ships, turning deserts into cities. Everywhere on Earth, life has found a way to persist. Here, there is no such instinct, no such momentum, no foundation on which biology can anchor itself. Life is the exception in the universe, not the rule. You take a long breath and feel the artificial air fill your lungs. Air manufactured by machines, heat generated by power cells, pressure maintained by seals, and structure and design. Every breath reminds you of the work required just to exist here. Each inhale is a small miracle of engineering. Each exhale is a reminder of how far from home you are. Still, there is something beautiful in this truth, something honest. The moon is silent, but its silence carries a message. It tells you that survival here requires not domination, but humility. Not insisting on Earth's comforts, but learning to accept the universe as it is, not as you wish it to be. Slowly, you begin to understand that the goal was never to conquer this place. Conquest implies ownership, mastery, control. But the moon cannot be controlled. It does not need to be. Its value is not in becoming another home for humanity, but in teaching humanity what it means to step beyond home. You look across the plain, the stars painting cold fire across the sky, You think about the failures and realize they were not failures at all. They were lessons. They were reminders that adaptation is harder than invention, that survival is harder than exploration, that understanding is harder than curiosity. And beneath those lessons, a deeper question begins to take shape. If the moon is not meant for life, then why are you here? Not to build a new Earth, not to force this world to become something it is not. You are here to learn how fragile life truly is, to learn what it takes to endure where everything resists you, to learn about humanity's place in a universe that does not revolve around human need. You realize that the moon, in its stillness and indifference, is offering something rare, a mirror, a way for you to see the limits of your own assumptions, a test of your ingenuity, your humility, your willingness to face a truth older than civilization. And as that realization settles inside you like lunar dust settling back to ground, a final thought emerges with quiet clarity. If this journey is not about conquest, then it must be about meaning. Meaning in why we travel so far from home, meaning in why we push into the unknown, meaning in why we risk failure in places that do not welcome us, which leads you to the question that will define everything that comes next. If not to conquer the moon, then what is this journey truly for? The realization settles slowly, the way lunar dust drifts back to the ground after a long, gentle arc. In the quiet following every lesson the moon has taught you, there comes a moment when you finally understand what all these struggles have been pointing toward. The dust that cuts, the radiation that threads itself through living cells, the cold that fractures metal, the darkness that stretches across half a month, the isolation that removes Earth from the sky, the endless cycle of problems born from your best solutions. All of it leads to a single truth. You did not come here to conquer this world. You came here to understand your own. In the silence, after that thought takes shape, you feel a shift within yourself, not a revelation of triumph, but a recognition of scale. A reminder that the universe is far larger, far older, far more patient than you are. The moon has been unchanging for billions of years. It will continue long after you leave. And that indifference you once feared now feels like something else entirely. It feels like a place of learning. The transition from your earlier reflections comes naturally, almost inevitably. You spent so much time trying to force the moon into the shape of Earth. You designed systems to mimic home, built habitats that preserved your familiar pressures and temperatures, carried with you air and water and warmth, as if they were the only ways life could exist. But in the quiet between attempts, you start to wonder if the purpose of coming here was never to replicate Earth at all. Maybe the purpose is to understand how fragile Earth actually is. Maybe the moon is not a destination but a mirror. Carl Sagan once wrote, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." Those words echo inside your mind as you step outside again, letting the stillness of the lunar surface stretch into your awareness. You look around at the dust, undisturbed, except for the faint pattern of your footprints, and you realize that exploration is not driven solely by ambition. It is driven by reflection, a desire to understand not just where we are, but who we are. The moon teaches that life is rare. The moon teaches that survival is deliberate. The moon teaches that existence itself is an achievement. Every challenge you faced here becomes a lesson about the wider universe. If humanity ever hopes to live beyond Earth, this is where the education begins. Not in comfortable laboratories, not in safe environments where mistakes can be corrected with a phone call or a tool from the next room. It begins here, in a place where every error has weight, where every oversight becomes a reminder of nature's absolute honesty. The dust teaches humility. It forces you to think about the smallest details, the tiny particles that behave like blades and cling with electric force. It reminds you that large dangers often arrive in miniature forms. If you wish to build a home somewhere else in the cosmos, you must learn to respect the smallest enemies as much as the largest. The radiation teaches vulnerability. It shows you that life, for all its resilience, is bound by delicate molecular threads. Energy from distant stars does not care about your plans or your courage. It arrives with the same strength whether you are ready or not. You learn that survival demands foresight, and foresight demands acceptance of risk. The cold teaches patience. It teaches that systems must be designed not only for function but for endurance. Life cannot depend on convenience. In a place where sunrise is a rare event and night lasts 14 days, you learn to think in cycles much larger than your own rhythms, cycles that demand a long view of engineering and of hope. The darkness teaches introspection. It takes away the visual comfort of Earth and leaves you with your own thoughts, your own doubts, your own perspective. In that absence, you begin to understand how much of your identity is tied to the world that raised you. You begin to appreciate the psychological strength required to push into places that do not offer reassurance. The isolation teaches independence. The moon forces decisions that cannot rely on immediate help. It demands systems that think for themselves and humans who adapt without waiting for instructions. This is not a flaw. It is preparation for worlds even farther away. The failures teach honesty. On Earth, nature forgives your miscalculations. On the moon, nature reveals them. Every solution that collapses points to the same truth. Progress requires humility. Every broken mechanism becomes a lesson in simplicity. Every malfunction becomes a reminder that the universe does not bend to your expectations but requires you to bend to its reality. And slowly, through all of this, you begin to see meaning in the struggle, meaning in the discomfort, meaning in the difficulty. The moon is teaching you how to survive away from home, not comfortably, not effortlessly, not without cost, but realistically. You begin to reflect on what it means for a civilization to dream of other worlds, not as flags or milestones, but as habitats, as futures, as places where generations may someday look up at a sky that does not include Earth at all. If that dream is ever to live, it begins here, with dust on your gloves, with radiation brushing against your bones, with cold at your feet and darkness at your visor, with the profound realization that humanity's greatest challenge is not distance, it is adaptation. And now, for the first time, you feel something that does not resemble fear or ambition. It resembles gratitude. The moon has not welcomed you, and yet it has taught you. It has not softened for you, and yet it has shaped you. It has not become home, and perhaps never will, but it has become a teacher, a stern teacher, but a fair one. As you stand on the surface, the stars burning quietly above the horizon, you understand that the true purpose of coming here is not survival itself. The purpose is growth. Growth in knowledge, growth in humility, growth in the understanding of what it will take to move beyond the cradle. Maybe the goal was never to settle this place forever. Maybe the goal is to learn how fragile your existence truly is and how strong you must become to protect it. The moon becomes a classroom, a proving ground, a reminder that the universe is vast and life is rare. Every lesson it gives prepares you for what lies farther out. Other moons, other planets, other worlds with challenges far greater than these. And once you understand that, a final thought rises like the first faint glow of sunrise after a long lunar night. Only when you learn what the moon has to offer will you be ready to step into the final part of the journey. In the end, the moon never moves toward us. It never softens. It never offers warmth or welcome. It simply stands in the darkness, silent and unchanged, exactly as it has for billions of years. But maybe that is why it matters, because in that silence, we hear ourselves more clearly. In that stillness, we confront the truth of our own fragility. We travel all this way to explore another world, only to discover the edges of our own nature, our curiosity, our limits, our courage. And someday, when lunar dust settles on a suit once more, when an astronaut looks up and sees Earth hanging in the black sky like a distant blue jewel, something quiet but profound takes shape. We finally understand. This journey was never about conquering the moon. It was about learning how to endure in a universe that does not bend for us. It was about preparing the first small steps toward the vastness ahead. And it was about realizing that in the coldest, most indifferent places, humanity discovers not its weakness, but its reason to keep going.